Clara built a world of fierce, solitary love for her son. A world designed to protect him from everything she feared the world would see when it looked at his face. The first thing Clara noticed, after the searing primal pain of birth subsided and the tiny squirming creature was placed on her chest, was the mark. It wasn't a harsh or disfiguring mark. Rather, it was a delicate, coffee-colored smudge, the shape of a tiny, perfectly formed oak leaf just below her son's right eye, its stem pointing gently towards his ear. The nurse, a woman with kind eyes and competent hands, had called it a café au lait spot, a common birthmark. But to Clara, in her exhausted, love-drunk state, it felt like a signature. As if God, or the universe, or simple random biology had signed its masterpiece, a tiny emblem of uniqueness on her perfect boy. She named him Leo for the lion-hearted boy she already knew. In the deepest, most unshakable part of her soul, he would become. That mark became the center of their small, fiercely protected universe in a quiet, tree-lined suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio. Leo's father, a man named David with a charming smile and promises that turned out to be as substantial as smoke, had vanished before the ultrasound pictures had even fully developed, scared off by the looming responsibilities of parenthood. So, from the very beginning, it was just Clara and Leo. She worked as a paralegal at a small but demanding firm, her life a meticulously organized, color-coded schedule of daycare drop-offs, legal briefs, grocery runs, and bedtime stories. She was his sole provider, his cheerleader, his comfort, and his protector, a role she shouldered with a ferocity that was both her greatest strength and her most profound vulnerability. "It's your special mark, my little lion," she would whisper to him in the soft glow of his nightlight, tracing the tiny leaf with her fingertip as his eyelids grew heavy. "It's so I can always find you. No matter how big the crowd, I'll always see my special leaf." And she meant it with every fiber of her being. In the fluorescent buzz of the supermarket, on the sun-drenched asphalt of the playground, her eyes would constantly, unconsciously, scan for that little brown leaf, a homing beacon for her heart, the visual confirmation that her world was still safe. This vigilant, almost hyper-aware love was not born solely from maternal instinct. It was fueled by a deep, humming anxiety that lived in the marrow of her bones, a low-grade electrical current that ran constantly beneath the surface of her life. A fear of the world's sharp edges, of the unknown, of the single, irreversible moment she might not be there to shield him. This anxiety manifested in small, almost imperceptible ways. The baby monitor that stayed on long after he'd outgrown it, its crackling silence a comfort to her. The relentless, late-night Googling of every childhood illness from the common cold to obscure genetic disorders. The way she'd hold her breath for a fraction of a second, her body tensed like a spring, when he climbed too high on the jungle gym, only releasing it when his feet were firmly back on the ground. The first real tremor hit their fragile world when Leo was 5. It was a brilliantly bright Saturday in late spring at the local community park, a place of squeaking swings and laughing children. Clara was momentarily distracted, chatting with another mom about the impending kindergarten orientation. Her back was turned for no more than 10, maybe 15 seconds. When she turned around, the blue plastic swing where Leo had been, legs pumping furiously towards the sky, was empty, swaying gently as a taunt. Her heart didn't just skip a beat. It plummeted into the cold, hollow pit of her stomach. Her eyes, frantically scanning the immediate area, the slide, the monkey bars, the sandbox, could not find the oak leaf. The world narrowed to a pinprick of sheer, unadulterated terror. "Leo!" she called out, her voice tight and higher than usual. No response. She ran, her legs feeling like water, towards the large tube slide. Nothing. The sandbox, where he loved to build elaborate castles. Empty except for a forgotten plastic shovel. The panic was a physical thing now, clawing at her throat, constricting her lungs. Then her gaze swept towards the periphery of the park, to a cluster of mature oak trees that marked its boundary. A man was standing there, partially obscured by the thick trunk of the largest tree, and he was holding Leo's hand. Clara's body moved before her mind could fully process the scene. She sprinted, a guttural, primitive cry tearing from her lips. "Get away from him! Leo, come here!" The man turned, startled. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a kind, weathered face and a faded baseball cap. Leo looked up, his own small face a mask of confusion. "Mommy? This is Mr. Henry. He found my ball. It rolled all the way over here." The man, Mr. Henry, smiled a gentle, slightly embarrassed smile and held up a bright red rubber ball. "Sorry, ma'am. Didn't mean to scare you. It rolled right to my feet." Just returning it to the young man. The relief was so violent it left her trembling, her knees weak. She snatched Leo's hand, her grip too tight, and muttered a choked, insincere, "Thank you," before pulling him away, her heart still hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She spent the rest of the day holding him on the couch, watching cartoons, her face buried in his hair. The image of that man's hand on her son's seared into her mind. Her fear, once abstract, now had a face, even if it was a benign, grandfatherly one. The world had just proven it could snatch him away in a heartbeat. The second incident, 2 years later, was more subtle and far more sinister. Leo was 7. A new family moved in next door. They seemed nice enough. The mother, Sarah, was a bubbly, stay-at-home mom who baked banana bread. The father, Greg, was a car salesman, overly friendly, with a too bright smile and a habit of being in his driveway, tinkering with his boat, precisely when Clara was leaving for work or coming home. He was always offering to watch Leo for a bit, if Clara needed to run an errand. His voice a little too eager. She always politely declined, her instincts bristling like a hedgehog's spines. One afternoon, she came home early from work, fighting off a migraine. She pulled into her driveway and noticed the backyard was quiet. Too quiet. She walked around the side of the house, and the sight that greeted her made her blood run cold. Greg was in his backyard, leaning far over the wooden fence that separated their properties. Leo was on his side, looking up at him. Greg was showing him a model airplane, but his gaze wasn't on the plane. It was fixed on Leo's face, on the birthmark, with an intensity that was possessive, scrutinizing. It wasn't the look of a friendly neighbor. It was the look of a collector examining a rare artifact. Clara didn't scream. She didn't say a word. Her voice, when she called Leo's name, was like chipped ice. "Leo, inside, now." The boy jumped, startled by her tone. Greg straightened up, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Just showing the kids something cool," he said, his voice casual, but Clara saw the flicker of something else in his eyes. Annoyance, perhaps, at being interrupted. That evening, driven by a cold, sickening compulsion she couldn't name, she did something she'd never done before. She sat at her home computer, the glow of the screen the only light in the dark room, and she began to dig. She looked up Greg's name, his wife's name, cross-referencing with their old address she'd seen on a moving box. It took hours of digging through vague public records and archived news articles from a small town in Indiana. But she found it. A sealed juvenile record for disorderly conduct. And then, more damningly, an arrest, years later, when he was in his early 20s, for inappropriate contact with a minor, a teenage boy. The charges were eventually dropped. The record whispered the word settlement, not shouted a conviction. But it was enough. It was everything. Clara, the paralegal, methodically printed the records. The next day, she went to the landlord, presented her findings not as a hysterical mother, but with the cold, precise logic of a legal professional. She cited the safety of the neighborhood, the potential liability. Within a month, the family was gone. She never told Leo why. She just held him a little tighter that night, the victory feeling hollow and terrifying. The world was full of wolves, some in grandfatherly disguises, some with the smiling faces of neighbors, and she had just chased one from their door. But the forest was vast, and she was tired. The biggest turning point, the one that shattered the very foundation of their dynamic, came when Leo was 12. He was evolving into a quiet, deeply sensitive and artistic boy, more comfortable with a charcoal sketch pad than a soccer ball. The birthmark, once a cute, unique signature she had celebrated, had become a target. The casual cruelty of middle school children is a particular kind of torture. They called him Dirty Face, Spot, Leopard. The whispers followed him in the hallways. He started wearing his sandy brown hair long, cultivating a curtain that fell over his right eye, a permanent shield. Clara's heart broke for him daily. Her protection, which had warded off strangers and predators, felt useless against this new, insidious enemy that wore the faces of children. She tried to talk to him, to reinforce the old, comforting mantra. It's special, Leo. It makes you. It's your father's. It's a mark of how unique you are. She had almost said your father's mark, but caught herself. The story of David's abandonment was a wound she had never known how to dress. He just shrugged her off, a new, impenetrable wall of adolescent resentment and pain building between them. It just makes me a freak, Mom. You don't get it. You're not the one they laugh at. He would retreat to his room, and the only sound would be the soft, furious scratching of his pencil on paper. The climax of this silent domestic war came on a rainy Tuesday in October. Clara was at her desk, reviewing a deposition, when her phone buzzed with a number she recognized as the middle school. The principal's secretary informed her in a clipped, professional tone that there had been a physical altercation and her presence was required immediately. When she arrived, her perfectly ordered world shattered completely. Leo was sitting on a hard plastic chair outside the principal's office, his lips split and swollen, his knuckles raw and scraped. But it was the look in his eyes that horrified her, a flat, empty defiance, a void where her sweet boy used to be. And standing across from him was a larger boy, Jake Miller, with a bloody nose being tended to by his furious, red-faced father, Bill, a man built like a linebacker who smelled faintly of motor oil. The story tumbled out in fractured pieces from the harried principal, Mrs. Albright. Jake had been taunting Leo about the birthmark, as had become his habit. But this time, he'd gone further. He'd snatched Leo's prized sketchbook from his backpack and started reading aloud, a private, heartfelt passage Leo had written, a fictionalized account of a boy meeting the father he'd never known, a father who was a pilot, an adventurer, a hero. Jake read it in a mocking, high-pitched voice, parodying the vulnerability laid bare on the page. Something deep within Leo, some final, foundational thread of restraint, had snapped. The principal talked about mandatory suspension policies, about conflict resolution seminars. But Bill Miller was having none of it. He pointed a thick, accusatory finger at Leo. "This little psycho attacked my boy over a few words. Look at him. He's got a mean streak. It's probably from not having a father around to teach him how to be a man, to control his temper." The words were a physical blow to Clara. They targeted her deepest, most private insecurities, that she wasn't enough, that her son was somehow lacking because of the family structure she had fought so hard to build. But before she could form a coherent, legalistic response, Leo stood up. His small body was trembling, with a rage so pure and so vast, it seemed to vibrate the air around him. "You want to know why I don't have a father?" Leo's voice was shrill, cracking with the strain of unshed tears and bottled-up fury. He wasn't looking at Bill Miller anymore. He was looking directly at Clara, his eyes filled with years of unasked questions and a pain she had never fully comprehended. "Why don't you tell him, Mom? Why don't you tell everyone why my dad left? Was it because of me? Was it because of this?" He jabbed a furious, trembling finger at the oak leaf on his face, his voice rising to a scream. "Did he take one look at his freak of a son and run away? Is that it? Did my own father not even want me?" The room fell into a stunned, profound silence. The principal looked down at her shoes, mortified. Bill Miller, for once, was speechless. The anger on his face replaced by a flicker of uncomfortable realization. Clara felt the floor drop out from beneath her. All her protection, all her vigilance, all her lies of omission had built a cage for her son. And in his mind, the lock was his own face. He believed he was the reason for his father's absence. He believed the mark she had taught him was special, was, in fact, a curse that had driven away the one person a boy is supposed to be able to count on. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply took the suspension paperwork from Mrs. Albright's desk, took Leo's hand. He didn't pull away. He was too numb, too hollowed out, and led him out of the school and into the rain. They drove home in a silence heavier than any punishment. The only sound, the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers pushing the tears of the sky aside. That night, after she heard the ragged, muffled sobs from his room finally subside into the uneven breath of exhausted sleep, Clara did something she had sworn on her own mother's grave she would never do. She went to the small, fireproof lockbox she kept on the top shelf of her closet, behind a stack of old sweaters. Inside, nestled next to their passports and social security cards, was a single sealed, yellowing envelope, its paper gone brittle with age. She broke the seal with a quiet, definitive tear. The contents were sparse. A faded Polaroid photograph of a handsome, smiling young man with kind eyes and a mop of dark, curly hair, and a single sheet of lined notebook paper. A letter dated 18 years ago. The handwriting was elegant, but slanted and shaky, as if written by a hand that could barely hold a pen. It was time. The truth had become less damaging than the lie. The next morning, she made Leo his favorite food, chocolate chip pancakes. He emerged from his room, sullen, withdrawn, his eyes puffy. He kept his head down, his hair once again a perfect curtain hiding his face, hiding the mark, hiding himself. "Leo," she said, her voice soft but firm, devoid of its usual frantic energy. "We need to talk, and I'm not going to lie to you anymore." She placed the photograph and the unfolded letter on the kitchen table between them. The man in the picture was not David. His name was Michael Ross, and he had been the great, all-consuming love of Clara's young life. They had met in college, two art students dreaming of a future filled with light and creation. He was a painter, brilliant and passionate. She had an eye for detail, but found her calling in the structured world of art history and, later, law. They were 20, and their future was a bright, open road. Then, 6 months after they got engaged, Michael was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive form of leukemia. The letter was from him, written in a hospital room during his final days. "My dearest Clara," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. Sorry for leaving you, and sorry for the burden I'm about to place on your shoulders. They say I don't have long. The treatments, they've stopped working. But we have a chance, you and I. A chance for a part of me, a part of us, to live on. Remember, before I started the strongest chemotherapy, we froze embryos. It was our hope for the future, a future I won't get to see. Clara, please, if you can, find the strength. Be brave. Have our child. Let a piece of my love for you stay in this world. I know it's too much to ask. It's the biggest ask anyone could ever make. But I'm asking. I want you to be a mother. I want to be a father, even if it's just in this way. I've painted our child 1,000 times in my mind. All my love forever, Michael." Leo read the letter. Then he read it again, his hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. The silence in the kitchen was profound, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. He looked at the photograph, really looked at it, at the man with the kind eyes who looked nothing like the shadowy figure of David he had constructed in his mind. "He didn't leave us, Leo," Clara said, tears finally streaming down her face, unchecked. These were not tears of fear, but of release, of a truth too long held captive. "He never even got to see you. He died 2 months before I finally found the courage to go through with the IVF procedure. You were born from so much love, Leo. So much wanted, cherished, fought for love. You were his last, most beautiful wish." She took a shaky breath. "The birthmark. It's not a curse. I always felt in my heart it was his sign. His way of leaving his fingerprint on you. A little leaf from the tree of life he couldn't stay to see grow. The oak leaf was his symbol, Leo. He used to paint them all the time." Leo looked up at her, and for the first time in years, he didn't try to hide his face. He pushed his hair back, fully revealing the mark. The wall of resentment and self-loathing crumbled, replaced by a flood of understanding, of grief for a man he'd never known, and of a profound, new, and solid identity. He wasn't the son abandoned by a coward. He was the son conceived in the boundless hope of a dying hero. The oak leaf was not a stain. It was a heraldic emblem. That was the first earth-shattering plot twist. The second, which served to cement this new reality, came a few weeks later. A new, fragile sense of peace began to settle over their home. It wasn't perfect. The scars of the past were still there, but the infection of the lie had been lanced. Leo stopped hiding his birthmark. He started drawing again, his art now filled with powerful, recurring images of strong, kind-faced men and mighty, deeply rooted oak trees. Clara, realizing that her overprotection had been a form of living in fear of the past repeating itself, consciously started to loosen her grip. She signed Leo up for a weekend art class at a respected studio in downtown Cincinnati, a small but significant act of trust. It was there that his art teacher, Ms. Valdez, a vibrant woman in her 40s with a keen, critical eye for talent and detail, kept looking at Leo with a strange, dawning recognition. It wasn't about the birthmark itself, but about its specific, unique shape. One day, after class, she pulled him aside as he was packing his supplies. "Leo, this is going to sound like a very strange question," she said gently, her brow furrowed in thought. "But that birthmark of yours, has it always been that exact shape? The oak leaf, I mean. It's so perfectly defined." Leo, now standing a little taller, proud of it, nodded. "Yeah, since I was born. My mom says it was my father's symbol." Ms. Valdez grew quiet, her eyes distant. "I knew an artist, years ago when I was in college at the Art Academy. He was brilliant, one of those people you just knew was destined for greatness. He had a series he was working on, his masterpiece, he called it. It was all based on a single, powerful symbol, an oak leaf. He said it represented strength, legacy, the things we leave behind even when we're gone. His name was Michael Ross." Leo's blood ran cold. It was the name from the letter. The name his mother had whispered to him in their new, truth-filled world. The name of the man in the photograph. He told Clara everything that evening. Clara, her paralegal instincts kicking into high gear, began to dig with a new purpose. Her previous research into Michael had been grief-stricken and brief. He had been an only child. His parents had passed away years before from a car accident, a tragedy that had made his own illness feel even crueler. She had assumed his artistic legacy, like his family line, had died with him. But Ms. Valdez provided a new, vital thread. Following this lead, they discovered that Michael's work, largely unknown and unappreciated in his lifetime, had been discovered posthumously by a small avant-garde gallery in New York's Lower East Side. A critic had stumbled upon his pieces in a storage locker auction and had written a small, glowing piece about the lost genius and his haunting oak leaf series. The series had since gained a minor but dedicated cult following. Driven by a profound need for Leo to connect with this tangible, lost part of himself, Clara did something reckless and beautiful. She scraped together their meager savings, booked 2 budget airline tickets, and they took a pilgrimage to New York City during Leo's spring break. The gallery, named The Verge, was a small, hushed, white-walled space in Chelsea, smelling of oil paint and old wood. And there on the walls were his paintings. They were breathtaking. They were not cheerful paintings. They were filled with a melancholy beauty, a deep longing. Landscapes at dusk, portraits of Clara that made her gasp and weep silently, still lifes of simple objects, all of them contained somewhere, woven into the fabric of the image, an oak leaf. The exact shape, the exact shade of soft brown as Leo's birthmark. In one, it was a shadow cast on a wall. In another, a pattern on a scarf. In a third, a lone leaf resting on a windowsill. The gallery owner, an elderly, elegant man named Arthur with small, round spectacles, was initially wary of the emotional woman and the quiet, wide-eyed boy. But when a trembling Clara showed him a picture of Leo's face, pointing to the mark, and then showed him the old photograph of Michael, The man's demeanor transformed into one of astonishment. He brought out a box of Michael's old journals and sketchbooks from a back room. In one of the very last journal entries, written in the same shaky hand as the letter Clara possessed, Michael had written about his desperate hope for the child he would never meet. He had sketched the oak leaf symbol over and over, and next to the most perfect rendering, he had written, "This will be my sign to them. My love, made visible. A part of me, watching over them always." The revelation was staggering. It was one thing to be told the mark was special. It was another entirely to see it, to have it validated by a body of work, by the intentional, artistic will of a dying man. Leo's birthmark wasn't just a random genetic quirk or a simple metaphor. It was a symbol, intentionally and lovingly willed into existence by his father's art, a literal and figurative mark of his legacy. It was a connection that transcended death, a conversation between a father and a son who had never met, conducted across time through the language of art. The story doesn't end with sudden wealth or international fame. While Michael's paintings had gained value, the true inheritance was intangible. Leo, now a young man of 18, no longer sees a flaw or a source of pain when he looks in the mirror. He sees a story. He sees a father's enduring love. He sees a mother's unwavering, ferocious strength. He sees a legacy of artistry that now flows through his own hands. Clara watches him now, packing a duffel bag and a portfolio case for his freshman year at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, a scholarship won entirely on the merit of his own incredible raw talent, a talent that clearly, undeniably, ran in his blood. The frantic, fearful mother, who saw danger in every shadow, has been replaced by a woman of quiet, steady confidence. She knows she cannot protect him from every heartache, from every professional disappointment, from the simple, brutal knocks of life. But she has given him the only armor that truly matters, the unshakable truth of who he is and where he comes from. He is not a boy defined by an absence, but by a profound and loving presence, however brief it was. He carefully tucks his newest sketchbook into his bag. On its deep blue cover, he has drawn a single, exquisitely detailed oak leaf, its veins painstakingly rendered, a testament to patience and love. He catches his mother's eye from across his childhood bedroom and smiles, a confident, whole and open smile that fully reveals the mark on his face. It is no longer something to be hidden or defended. It is a badge of honor, a compass, a legacy of love passed from a father who dreamed him into existence, through a mother who moved heaven and earth to make that dream a reality, and now, finally, carried proudly into the wide world by a son who knows his own name and his own worth. The long, hard winter of fear was over. For both of them, a vibrant, hopeful spring had finally, unequivocally, begun. But this resolution came at a cost. Clara's lie was born from love, but it let a toxic belief root in her son's heart for years. Her protection became the very thing that nearly broke him. This is the dilemma. Can a lie ever be an act of love? Or is the most dangerous betrayal hiding a painful truth for someone's own good? There is no easy answer. Where do you stand? Argue your case in the comments. If this story of a painful truth and a powerful legacy challenged you, become a part of our next chapter, subscribe to the What Happened Then stories, and share your perspective. The next story awaits.